Clara Mercer pressed her dying son against her chest and walked into the blizzard. She had no destination, no hope, only a mother's desperate prayer that God might take them quick instead of slow. 4-year-old Willie hadn't cried in 2 days. He was too weak, too empty. When his small hand stopped gripping her collar, she fell to her knees in the snow and screamed into the wind, the sound of a woman with nothing left to lose. That's when she saw him, a rider emerging from the white, like death itself, or salvation. She couldn't tell which. Stay with us for a story of survival love and the stranger who changed everything. Subscribe now and comment your city below. Let me know how far this story travels. The blizzard had been howling for 3 days when Clara Mercer made her choice. She wrapped Willie in the last clean blanket, the one she'd been saving for a burial shroud, and lifted him against her chest. His body weighed almost nothing. A 4-year-old boy should not weigh nothing. "Mama?" Tommy's voice cracked from the corner. 10 years old and trying so hard to be a man. "Mama, where are you going?" "Stay with your sister." "But..." "Thomas James Mercer." She turned and something in her face made him step back. "You keep that fire going. You keep Sarah warm. You don't open this door for anyone but me." Tommy's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue. She could see it in his eyes, the same stubborn streak his father had back before Samuel Mercer proved that stubborn and strong weren't the same thing. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. Sarah sat on the cot, 7 years old, knees pulled to her chest. She didn't ask where Mama was going. She didn't ask when Mama was coming back. She'd stopped asking questions 2 winters ago when her father walked out into a morning just like this one and never returned. Clara kissed Tommy's forehead, then Sarah's. She didn't say goodbye. Saying goodbye meant admitting what she was about to do. She opened the door and the wind hit her like a fist. The cold was a living thing. It crawled under her collar, bit through her boots, turned her tears to ice before they could fall. Clara tucked her chin and pushed forward 1 step, then another, then another. Willie stirred against her chest. "Mama, hush now, baby. Mama, I'm hungry." Her throat closed. 5 days. 5 days since the last of the cornmeal ran out. 5 days since she'd given her portion to the children, then watched them divide even that among themselves, because they knew God helped them. Even 4-year-old Willie knew that there wasn't enough. "I know, sweetheart." Her voice broke. "I know you're hungry. Is Papa coming back?" She stopped walking. The wind screamed around her, tearing at her hair. Her skirt, the edges of the blanket wrapped around her son. "No, baby." She'd never said it out loud before. Not once in 3 years. "Papa's not coming back." Willie was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are we gonna die, Mama?" Clara closed her eyes. The snow stung her face like needles. Her legs were shaking, had been shaking for days, and she wasn't sure how much longer they would hold. "I don't know," she whispered. The first honest thing she'd said in months. She started walking again. Yeah, she didn't know how far she'd gone when her knees buckled. The snow caught her soft and cold and almost kind. Willie whimpered as they fell, and she curled around him, trying to shield his small body from the wind. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends. 3 years of fighting, 3 years of scraping and struggling, and refusing to give up, even when everyone in Redemption told her she should. 3 years of being the woman Samuel Mercer left behind, the woman too proud to take charity, and too stubborn to admit defeat. And for what? To die in a snowbank half a mile from a house with no food and no heat, and 2 children who would find out tomorrow that their mother was never coming home. Clara pressed her face into Willie's hair and sobbed. "Please," she whispered. "Please, I don't care about me. Just save my children. Just..." A sound cut through the wind. Hoofbeats. Heavy and slow, muffled by snow, but getting closer. Clara lifted her head. Through the white, a shape emerged. A horse buckskin-colored head bowed against the storm. And on its back, A man tall, broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low and his coat crusted with ice. He saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind howled between them, filling the silence with cold and fury. Then the man swung down from his saddle. He moved like someone who'd spent his whole life in storms. No hesitation, no wasted motion. 3 strides brought him to her side, and then he was crouching in the snow, one gloved hand reaching toward Willie. Clara flinched back. "Don't touch him." The man stopped. His face was half hidden by his hat brim, but she could see his eyes dark, steady, unreadable. "Ma'am." His voice was low, roughened by cold. "Your boy ain't moving. He's sleeping." "He ain't sleeping." The man's jaw tightened. "He's dying." The words hit her like a slap. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong to hold Willie tighter and dare him to try to take her son away. But she looked down at Willie's face, pale still, his lips tinged blue, and the fight went out of her. "I know," she said. "I know he's dying." The man was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled off one glove and pressed his bare hand against Willie's cheek. "He's cold," he said, "but he's breathing." "You got a house nearby?" Clara nodded. She couldn't speak. "How far?" Half a mile. Maybe more." The man stood. In one smooth motion, he lifted Clara to her feet, then took Willie from her arms before she could protest. "I'll carry him. You hold on to my arm. Don't let go." "I don't—" She swayed, and his free hand caught her elbow. "I don't even know your name." He looked at her, then really looked, and something flickered in those dark eyes. Pain, maybe. Or recognition, the kind that comes from seeing your own ghosts in someone else's face. "Josiah," he said. "Josiah Cole." He turned toward his horse, and Clara Mercer followed. The walk back felt like a dream, a nightmare, something in between. Clara couldn't feel her feet anymore. Couldn't feel much of anything, except Josiah's arm under her hand, solid and steady and warm, even through 2 layers of frozen wool. He walked slow enough for her to keep up, but fast enough that he knew every second mattered. Willie lay limp against his shoulder, small, so terribly small. "How long?" Josiah asked without turning his head. "What?" "Since he ate. How long?" Clara's throat tightened. 5 days, almost 6. Josiah didn't react, didn't curse, didn't pray, didn't tell her everything would be all right. He just kept walking one step after another, steady as a heartbeat. "The others," he said. "How many?" 2. Boy and a girl, 10 and 7. "They eating?" "Same as him. Same as me." Now he did react, a slight hitch in his stride, a tightening of his shoulders. But his voice stayed level. "Your husband, gone." The word came out flat. Empty. 3 years. Josiah nodded once. He didn't ask for details. Didn't offer sympathy or judgment or any of the things Clara had learned to expect from the good people of redemption. He just said, "Storm will pass by morning. I'll ride to town for supplies." Clara almost laughed. Almost. "Town won't help. They think I'm cursed." Cursed. Samuel owed money, lots of it. When he left, the debt stayed. She stumbled, caught herself on his arm. "Pastor says it's God's punishment. For marrying a weak man. For being too proud to beg." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. The wind filled the silence, cold and indifferent. Then he said, "Pastor sounds like a fool." Clara stared at the back of his head. No one in 3 years had said anything like that. Not once. "Careful," she managed. "God might hear you." "God and I ain't on speaking terms." He shifted Willie's weight against his shoulder. "But I reckon he's got bigger problems than one tired cowboy calling out a hypocrite." Despite everything, the cold, the fear, the certainty that she was walking toward the end of something, Clara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. It wasn't a smile, not quite, but it was close. The house appeared through the snow like a ghost. Sawed walls, sagging roof, a thin trail of smoke fighting its way up from the chimney. Clara had never been so grateful to see anything in her life. Tommy must have been watching through the window because the door flew open before they reached the porch. "Mama!" He stopped dead when he saw Josiah. His small face went hard suspicious. "Who's that?" "Help," Clara said. "He's help." Tommy didn't move. His eyes tracked Josiah's every step as the man carried Willie through the door. "Mister?" Tommy's voice cracked. "That's my brother." Josiah crouched down slow and careful until he was eye level with the boy. Willie still lay against his shoulder, but now his eyes were fluttering, trying to open, trying to understand. "I know," Josiah said. "And right now your brother needs to get warm. You got blankets?" Tommy nodded. "Fetch 'em, quick now." The boy ran. Sarah was still on the cot, but she'd pressed herself back against the wall, watching Josiah with wide, frightened eyes. Clara knelt beside her. "It's all right, sweetheart. He's a friend." "He's big," Sarah whispered. "I know. Is he gonna hurt us?" Clara looked across the room at Josiah, who was laying Willie down beside the stove, pulling off the boy's frozen boots with hands that were steady and sure and impossibly gentle. "No," she said. "I don't think he is." The next few hours blurred together. Josiah worked without speaking, without asking permission, without waiting to be told what needed doing. He built up the fire until the little house glowed with heat. He melted snow for water, then heated it on the stove. He pulled food from his saddlebag, salt pork cornmeal, a twist of dried apples, and started cooking before Clara could find the words to thank him. She sat on the floor beside Willie, holding his small hand, watching his face for any sign of change. "He's warming up." Josiah's voice came from behind her. "That's good. He hasn't opened his eyes. Give him time." A pause. "Here." She turned. Josiah was holding out a tin cup, steam rising from the rim. "What is it?" "Broth. From the pork." He crouched down beside her. "Drink." "The children are eating." He nodded toward the table where Tommy and Sarah sat with bowls of cornmeal mush, shoveling food into their mouths, like they'd forgotten what it tasted like. "Now drink." Clara took the cup. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The first sip hit her stomach like fire. The second made her eyes water. The third, she choked, coughed, and felt tears streaming down her face. "Easy." Josiah's hand was on her back, steadying her. "Slow down. You got time now." "I thought—" She couldn't finish, couldn't say the words. "I know." His voice was low, soft, almost kind. "I know what you thought." She looked at him, really looked, past the stubble and the hard jaw and the eyes that had seen too much. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you stop?" Josiah was quiet for a long moment. His gaze drifted to Willie, then to Tommy and Sarah, then back to her. "Because I heard him crying," he said finally. "Your boy. Heard him through the wind." Clara shook her head. "Willie hasn't cried in 2 days. He's too weak." "Then maybe I heard something else." Josiah stood, brushed off his knees. "Maybe I just couldn't ride past." He walked to the stove and Clara watched him go. Willie woke just before midnight. Clara had dozed off beside him, one hand still wrapped around his fingers. She felt the squeeze before she heard the voice. "Mama." Her eyes flew open. Willie was looking up at her, pale and thin and exhausted, but alive. Alive. "Baby." She gathered him into her arms, pressing kisses against his hair, his forehead, his cheeks. "Oh, baby, you're okay. You're okay." "I'm hungry, Mama." Clara laughed. It came out wet, broken, more sob than sound. "I know, sweetheart. I know." She looked up. Josiah was standing by the stove watching. His face gave nothing away, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of relief maybe, or something deeper. "I'll heat up more broth," he said. Clara nodded. She couldn't trust her voice. Josiah moved to the stove, and she held her son, and for the first time in 3 years, Clara Mercer let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they might survive. The storm died before dawn. Clara woke to silence. Real silence, the kind that comes after violence, when the world holds its breath and waits to see what's left. She sat up on the cot. The children were still asleep, all 3 of them now tangled together under every blanket in the house. Willie's color had returned. His breathing was deep and even. Josiah was by the door pulling on his coat. Clara's stomach dropped. "You're leaving." He didn't turn around. "Need to get to town. Your supplies won't last a week." "Town won't sell to me. I told you." "They'll sell to me." He settled his hat on his head. "I ain't cursed." Clara stood. Her legs were stronger than yesterday, but they still shook. "And then what? You get the supplies, you bring them back, and then what, you ride off." Josiah turned. His face was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. A tension she hadn't noticed before. "That was the plan," he said slowly. "Plans change." "Ma'am." "Clara." She crossed her arms. "My name is Clara, and I'm not asking you to stay forever. I'm not asking for anything. But those children," she nodded toward the cot, "they've seen too many people leave. If you're going to ride off, do it now, before they wake up, before they start hoping." Josiah studied her. The silence stretched between them, heavy and full. "You always this direct?" he asked finally. "I used to be polite." Clara lifted her chin. "Polite nearly killed my children." Something shifted in his eyes. Not quite a smile, but close. The same almost expression she'd seen during the walk back. "I'll be back by sundown," he said. "Maybe sooner if the roads are clear." "And after that—" He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small book, worn leather-bound soft at the edges. "My brother gave me this," he said. 15 years ago. Told me to give it to someone worth staying for." He set the book on the table by the door. "I ain't found that person yet," he said. "But I'm starting to think I might be in the right place." He opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Clara watched until he'd mounted his horse and disappeared over the rise. Then she walked to the table and picked up the book. It was a Bible. Old, worn, the pages soft from years of handling. On the inside cover in faded ink, someone had written, "For Josiah, find something worth staying for." Ezra. Clara ran her fingers over the words. She didn't know who Ezra was, didn't know what had happened to him, or why Josiah carried this book like a wound he couldn't let heal. But she knew one thing. He'd left it behind, and that meant he was coming back. Tommy found her still holding the Bible when the sun came up. "Mama." He rubbed his eyes. "Where's the man?" "He went to town, for supplies." Tommy's face clouded. "He ain't coming back. Nobody comes back." Clara knelt down, took her son's face in her hands. "Look at me, Thomas." He looked. "I know you're scared. I know Papa left and it hurt. But this man—" She glanced at the Bible in her hand. "This man left something behind, something important. That means he's coming back for it. What if he doesn't? Then we survive anyway." She kissed his forehead. "Because that's what Mercers do. We survive." Tommy didn't look convinced, but he nodded. "Now." Clara stood. "Let's get your brother and sister up. We've got a house to clean before company comes." Tommy's eyes widened. "Company." "That's right." Clara smiled her first real smile in months. We're gonna have a guest for dinner." Josiah rode into the yard just as the sun touched the horizon. Clara was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, the Bible tucked against her chest. She watched him dismount, watched him unload sacks of flour and salt and coffee from his saddlebags, watched him tie his horse to the post with hands that were sure and practiced. He climbed the steps, stopped in front of her. "You're still here," he said. "It's my house." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Fair point." Clara held out the Bible. "You forgot this." Josiah looked at it for a long moment. Then he reached out not for the book, but for her hand. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and rough and steady. "I didn't forget," he said quietly. "I left it." "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because I needed a reason to come back." Clara's heart stuttered. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Josiah released her hand and picked up the nearest sack. "Now?" he said. "You gonna let me in, or am I sleeping with the horse?" Clara laughed. It surprised her. The sound, the feeling, the way it bubbled up from somewhere she'd thought was empty. "Get inside," she said. "The children have been waiting." Josiah smiled. It was small, barely there, but it changed his whole face. He walked past her into the house, and Clara Mercer followed. Dinner that night was the loudest the little house had been in 3 years. Tommy asked Josiah 100 questions about his horse, his gun, his boots, whether he'd ever shot a real outlaw. Sarah sang a song she'd made up about snow and stars, and a cowboy who came out of the storm. Willie ate 3 bowls of cornmeal and fell asleep in Josiah's lap. Clara watched it all from across the table, her heart so full it ached. This wasn't safety. She knew that. She didn't know this man didn't know where he came from, or what he was running from, or how long he would stay. But her children were laughing. Her son was sleeping. Her daughter was singing. And for tonight, that was enough. Later, after the children were in bed, and the fire had burned down to coals, Josiah sat by the stove, the Bible open in his hands. He wasn't reading, just holding it. Clara sat across from him, her own hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "Who's Ezra?" she asked quietly. Josiah didn't look up. "My brother." "Where is he now?" A long pause. The fire cracked and popped. "Gone," Josiah said. 15 years. Clara nodded. She didn't push. She knew what it was like to carry ghosts. "That's why you stopped," she said. "In the storm. It wasn't because you heard Willie crying." Josiah finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, deep, full of something she couldn't name. "I stopped because I saw you," he said. "On your knees in the snow holding your boy. And I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "I thought maybe this time I can do something right." Clara set down her cup. Slowly, carefully, she reached across the space between them and laid her hand over his. "You did," she said. "You did something right." Josiah stared at their hands. His breathing was uneven. Rough. "I ain't a good man, Clara." "I didn't ask for a good man." She squeezed his fingers. "I asked for someone who stays." He looked up at her. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the hard lines, the old scars, the years of loneliness etched into every feature. "Then I'll stay," he said, "long as you'll have me." Clara smiled. "That might be a while." "I got time." Outside the wind had stilled. The stars were out bright and cold and eternal. And in a little sod house on the edge of the prairie, 2 broken people sat by a dying fire and began slowly, carefully, one word at a time, to build something new. Josiah was gone before sunrise. Clara woke to cold sheets and an empty house, her heart slamming against her ribs before she saw the note on the table. 3 words scratched in pencil. "Fixing the barn." She pressed her hand against her chest and breathed. Tommy found her like that, standing by the window, watching Josiah haul rotted boards out of the barn and stack them in the snow. "He's still here," Tommy said, surprised, almost accusatory. "He said he would be." "Papa said that too." Clara turned to look at her son, 10 years old and already so tired, so careful. She knelt down and took his hands. "I know, baby, I know Papa hurt us, but not everyone—" "Don't." Tommy pulled away. "Don't tell me he's different. You don't know that." He walked to the stove and started building up the fire, his small shoulders rigid with anger he didn't know how to name. Clara let him go. Some lessons couldn't be taught. They had to be lived. Sarah came padding out from the back room, Willie's hand in hers. The little boy's color was better today, pink instead of gray, but he still moved slow. Careful, like he wasn't sure his body would hold him. "Mama," Sarah's voice was soft. "Is the cowboy making breakfast?" Clara almost smiled. "No, sweetheart, I am." "Oh." Sarah's face fell just a little. "He made good mush. Better than mine." Sarah didn't answer, which was answer enough. Clara laughed, really laughed, and pulled her daughter into a hug. "Well then, maybe I'll ask him to teach me." The morning passed in small miracles. Willie ate 2 bowls of oatmeal and asked for a third. Tommy went outside to help Josiah without being asked, coming back an hour later with sawdust in his hair and something close to respect in his eyes. Sarah sang while she swept the floor, making up words about horses and snow and men who came out of storms. Clara watched it all, her hands busy with mending her mind, busy with questions she didn't dare ask. Who was he really? Where had he come from? What had put that darkness in his eyes? The kind that only showed when he thought no one was looking. And most importantly, how long until he left? She was still thinking about it when Josiah came inside, stamping snow from his boots, his face red from cold. "Barn's not as bad as it looks," he said. "Roof's solid. Just needs new boards on the south side. We don't have boards." "I know." He pulled off his gloves. "I'll ride to town tomorrow. See what I can find." Clara set down her mending. "They won't help you. Not if they know you're staying here." "Then I won't tell them." "Josiah." "Clara." He said her name like it meant something, like it was a word he'd been waiting his whole life to say. "I've dealt with worse than small-town gossip. Let me handle it." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he didn't understand that redemption wasn't just unfriendly, it was cruel. That 3 years of cold shoulders and whispered insults had taught her exactly what these people thought of a woman alone. But he was looking at her with those steady dark eyes, and something in her chest loosened. "Fine," she said. "But I'm coming with you." His eyebrows rose. "You sure that's wise?" "Probably not." She picked up her mending again. "But I'm done hiding." That night, Josiah told them a story. It started simple enough. Tommy asked about Texas, and Josiah mentioned a cattle drive he'd worked when he was 17. But one question led to another, and soon all 3 children were gathered at his feet, eyes wide, while he described stampedes and river crossings, and a cook named Beans, who could make biscuits out of dirt and determination. Clara sat in the corner, half listening, half watching. She'd never seen her children like this, so focused, so hungry for something that wasn't food. "Did you ever get hurt?" Tommy asked. "On the drives." Josiah's hand moved to his left leg just for a second. Then it dropped. "Once or twice." "What happened?" "Tommy." Clara's voice carried a warning, but Josiah shook his head. "It's all right." He looked at Tommy, then at Sarah and Willie. "I got shot 8 years ago. Card game went bad in a town called Abilene." Sarah gasped. "Did it hurt?" "Like hellfire." Josiah caught himself. "Sorry, ma'am. Like, very much." Clara bit back a smile. "I've heard worse." The man who shot me, Josiah continued. He was cheating. I called him on it. He didn't take kindly to being called a liar. Did you shoot him back? Tommy's eyes were bright, eager. No. Why not? Josiah was quiet for a moment. The fire crackled between them. Because killing a man changes you, he said finally. Even when he deserves it. Even when you got no choice. It takes something out of you that don't grow back. Tommy frowned. But what if he was gonna kill you? Then you do what you have to do. Josiah's voice was heavy, old. But you don't forget it, and you don't pretend it don't matter. The room fell silent. Even Willie, too young to understand, seemed to feel the weight of the words. Then Sarah said, I'm glad you didn't die, Mr. Josiah. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or gratitude. Me too, little one, he said softly. Me too. Later, after the children were asleep, Clara found Josiah on the porch. He was standing at the rail, looking out at nothing, just darkness and snow and the endless flat of the prairie. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. She stopped beside him, didn't speak, just waited. You want to know about Ezra? He said finally. It wasn't a question. Only if you want to tell me. He was quiet for a long time, so long that Clara thought he might not answer at all. Then he said, He was my brother, younger by 3 years, smarter than me, funnier. The kind of person who walked into a room and made it brighter just by being there. Clara nodded. She knew people like that. Had been married to one once before. The brightness turned out to be just a mask for something hollow underneath. We grew up in Tennessee, Josiah continued. Pa was a blacksmith. Ma died when Ezra was born. Pa never forgave him for it, not really, so I raised him best I could. That's a lot for a child. Wasn't a child for long. Josiah's jaw tightened. When I was 20, Pa died. Left us nothing but debts and a forge nobody wanted. So we headed west. Figured we'd make our fortune on the cattle trails. Did you? Almost. He paused. Ezra was good with cards. Too good. He could read a man's face like it was a newspaper. Won more hands than he lost, which made him popular and dangerous at the same time. Clara felt the story turning, darkening. She stayed quiet. One night in Kansas, he won big. Too big. The other player, a man named Silas Crane, accused him of cheating. Ezra denied it. Things got heated. Crane pulled a knife. Josiah's hands tightened on the porch rail. I stepped in, tried to stop it. But Crane was fast and mean, and he didn't care who he hurt. He cut Ezra bad across the arm deep. And He stopped, swallowed. You what? Clara asked softly. I killed him. The words came out flat. Dead. Grabbed a bottle off the bar and hit him so hard his skull caved in. He was dead before he hit the ground. Clara didn't flinch, didn't step back, just stood there close enough to touch. You were protecting your brother. I was a murderer. Josiah turned to look at her. That's what the law called it. Self-defense don't mean much when the dead man's got friends. I had to run. Had to leave Ezra behind while he was still bleeding. Where did you go? Montana first, then Wyoming, Colorado, anywhere that wasn't Kansas. His voice cracked. I sent letters when I could. Never got answers. Figured Ezra was mad at me for leaving. Figured he'd forgive me eventually. But Josiah closed his eyes. 6 months later I got word he was dead. Hanged himself in a barn outside Dodge City. Left no note, no explanation. Just gone. Clara's heart clenched. She reached out, laid her hand on his arm. Josiah. 15 years. He opened his eyes. They were wet, though no tears fell. 15 years I've been carrying that. Wondering what I did wrong. Wondering if I could have saved him, if I'd stayed. You couldn't have known. I should have. His voice was raw. He was my brother. I was supposed to protect him. And I left him alone in a world that didn't give a damn whether he lived or died." Clara didn't speak. What was there to say? She knew guilt like that, knew the weight of it, the way it pressed down until you couldn't breathe. She'd felt it every time she looked at her children's hungry faces and wondered if she was enough, if she would ever be enough. "You're not alone anymore," she said finally. "And neither are we." Josiah looked at her. The moonlight caught his face, all hard angles and soft shadows. "Clara, I'm not asking for promises." She cut him off. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm just saying tonight, right now, you're here, and that's more than I've had in 3 years." He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. They stood like that until the cold drove them inside. Neither of them spoke again. But something had shifted between them, a door opening just a crack. Enough to let a little light through. The ride to redemption took 2 hours. Clara sat in front of Josiah on the buckskin horse, her back against his chest, his arms around her to hold the reins. It was the closest she'd been to a man in 3 years, and she hated how much she didn't hate it. The town appeared slowly, a smudge on the horizon that grew into buildings, then into streets, then into the familiar faces of people who had turned their backs on her when she needed them most. Josiah felt her stiffen. "You okay?" "No." She lifted her chin. "But I will be." They stopped outside Holloway's general store. Clara slid down from the horse, straightened her skirt, and walked inside like she owned the place. Agnes Holloway looked up from behind the counter. 60 years old, gray-haired, sharp-eyed. The only person in redemption who'd ever shown Clara anything close to kindness. "Well, well." Agnes set down her ledger. "Clara Mercer. Thought you'd frozen to death by now." "Not yet." "I can see that." Agnes's eyes moved past Clara to the door where Josiah had just appeared. "And who's this?" "A friend." Agnes didn't look convinced. "Friend got a name. Josiah Cole." He stepped forward, pulled off his hat. "Ma'am." Agnes studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she nodded and turned back to Clara. "What do you need?" Clara pulled a list from her pocket. It was short, they couldn't afford much, but it was something. "Flour, salt, coffee if you've got it, and—" She hesitated. "Boards, for the barn." Agnes's eyebrows rose. "That's more than you've bought in 6 months." "I know." "You got money." Clara's face reddened. "I can pay. Some now, the rest when—" "I'll cover it." Josiah stepped up beside her. "Whatever she needs." Agnes looked between them. A slow smile spread across her face. "Well now," she said. "That's interesting." "It's not," Clara started. "Oh, I know what it's not." Agnes was already pulling items off the shelves. "Question is, do you—" Before Clara could answer, the door banged open. A man walked in, tall, lean, with a face like a hatchet, and eyes that made Clara's skin crawl. She recognized him instantly. Silas Crane's cousin. Luther. He'd been in redemption for 6 months now, buying up land from desperate farmers, squeezing out families who couldn't pay their debts. Half the town owed him money. The other half was afraid of him. Luther stopped when he saw Clara. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Mercer." He said her name like it tasted bad. "Didn't expect to see you upright. Life's full of surprises. Ain't it just?" His eyes moved to Josiah, and something flickered there. Recognition. Suspicion. Clara couldn't tell. "Who's your friend? None of your business." "Everything in this town is my business." Luther stepped closer. "Especially when it concerns a woman who owes me $400. Clara felt Josiah tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm, a warning. "I don't owe you anything," she said quietly. "That debt was my husband's." "Your husband's dead." Luther shrugged. "Debt passes to the widow. That's the law." Samuel's not dead. He's just gone 3 years without a word. Luther's smile widened. Sweetheart, he's dead. Or might as well be. Either way, you're on the hook. She's not on any hook. Josiah's voice cut through the tension like a blade. And you'll address her properly, or you'll answer to me. Luther turned to look at him. Really look. The smile faded from his face. Do I know you, friend? No. Funny. You look familiar. I got one of those faces. The two men stared at each other. The air in the store crackled with something dangerous. Then Agnes slammed a sack of flour down on the counter. That's enough, she snapped. Luther, you want to conduct business? You do it in your own office. This is my store, and I won't have threats made under my roof. Luther's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. This isn't over, he said to Clara. You've got 30 days to pay. After that, I take the land. He walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him. Clara realized she was shaking. Easy. Josiah's hand was on her back, warm and steady. He's gone. For now. She turned to Agnes. What does he know about the debt? Agnes's face was grim. More than he should. Someone's been feeding him information, old records, land claims. He's been buying up half the county, and anyone who can't pay loses everything. How much does Clara really owe? Josiah asked. By my count, nothing. Samuel took that debt with him when he left. But Luther's got lawyers in Denver who say different, and lawyers in Denver tend to win. Clara closed her eyes. 30 days. 30 days to find $400 she didn't have, or lose everything she'd fought 3 years to keep. There's something else. Agnes's voice was careful. Something you should know. What? Agnes looked at Josiah. That man Luther Crane, his cousin, was named Silas. The color drained from Josiah's face. Agnes? I don't know the whole story. Agnes held up a hand. And I don't want to. But I know Luther's been looking for someone who killed Silas 15 years ago in Kansas. Clara turned to Josiah. He was staring at the floor, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. We need to go, he said quietly. Josiah. Now Clara. She looked at Agnes, who nodded once. Go, her eyes said. I'll handle this. They rode home in silence. Clara could feel the tension in Josiah's body, the way he held himself like a man expecting a blow. She wanted to ask, wanted to demand the truth, but she already knew. Luther Crane was Silas Crane's family, and Silas Crane was the man Josiah had killed. When they reached the house, Tommy was waiting on the porch. His face was white. Mama, there was a man here. Clara's blood went cold. What man? He didn't give a name, just asked questions about who was living here. I didn't tell him nothing, I swear. Josiah was already off the horse, moving toward the barn. Did you see which way he went? North, toward town. Josiah stopped. His whole body went still. He's watching us, he said quietly. Luther. He's been watching us. Clara gathered Tommy into her arms. Over his head, she met Josiah's eyes. What do? We prepare. His voice was hard. And we don't let him win. That night, Clara found Josiah sitting by the fire with the Bible in his hands. He wasn't reading, just staring at the worn leather, running his fingers over the edges like he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. She sat down across from him. You knew, she said. You knew Luther was Silas's family. I suspected. He didn't look up. The name, the way he looked at me. It was too much coincidence. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought I could handle it. His voice cracked. Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Clara felt her heart twist. How am I looking at you? He finally met her eyes. Like I'm dangerous. You are dangerous. She leaned forward. But not to me. Not to my children. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She reached out and took the Bible from his hands. You've had 100 chances to hurt us. 100 chances to take what you wanted and leave. But you're still here. You're still fighting for us. Josiah's breath caught. Why? She asked softly. Why stay? Why risk everything for a woman you barely know? He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled between them. Because when I saw you in that snow, he said finally, holding your boy praying for a miracle, I saw myself. 15 years ago, kneeling in the dirt outside that barn, begging God to bring Ezra back. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't save him, Josiah whispered. But maybe I can save you. She stood, walked around the fire, knelt down beside him. I don't need saving, she said. I need a partner. Someone who'll stand with me, not in front of me. Clara. I mean it. She took his face in her hands. Whatever comes next, Luther, the debt, all of it, we face it together. No more secrets, no more running. Josiah stared at her. His eyes were wet, his breathing uneven. I don't deserve this, he said. Neither do I. She smiled through her tears. But here we are. She leaned in and pressed her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, two broken people finding something whole. Then Willie's voice came from the back room, sleepy and small. Mama, I had a bad dream. Clara pulled back, laughed, wiped her eyes. I'll be right there, baby. She stood, but Josiah caught her hand. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For believing I'm worth staying for. She squeezed his fingers. Prove me right. Then she went to comfort her son, and Josiah sat by the dying fire, and somewhere outside, the wind began to blow. But this time, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning, and warnings could be heeded. The warning came 3 days later. Clara found it nailed to the barn door at dawn, a single sheet of paper with words cut from newspapers, pasted crooked like a child's ransom note. Leave or burn. Her hands shook as she tore it down. Behind her, Josiah's boots crunched through the frozen ground. What is it? She held it out, couldn't speak. Josiah took the paper. His face went hard, cold. The softness she'd seen by the fire 3 nights ago vanished like it had never existed. Get the children inside, he said. Josiah. Now Clara. She didn't argue. Something in his voice told her this wasn't the time. Tommy was already awake when she came through the door, pulling on his boots with the urgency of a boy who'd learned too young that mornings could bring danger. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing. Stay inside today. But I was going to help Josiah with the inside. Clara heard the fear in her own voice and hated it. Please, Tommy, just do what I say. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yes, ma'am. Sarah and Willie were still asleep, tangled together under the quilts. Clara stood in the doorway and watched them breathe, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Leave or burn. She'd survived 3 years alone, survived hunger and cold and the slow death of hope. But this was different. This was someone wanting to hurt them, wanting to destroy everything she'd fought to keep. The door opened behind her. Josiah. I'm riding to town, he said quietly. Clara turned. No. Clara? That's what he wants. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the children wouldn't hear. Luther wants you to come to him, wants you angry and careless. You ride into redemption right now. You're giving him exactly what he needs. And if I sit here and wait while he threatens my... Josiah stopped, caught himself. While he threatens you. Clara's breath hitched. My. He'd almost said my family. We need help. she said. Real help, legal help. There's no law in redemption that'll side with us over Luther Crane. Then we go over redemption. Clara's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. Agnes mentioned lawyers in Denver. Men Luther uses. But there must be others honest ones. Men who don't owe him anything. Josiah shook his head. Denver's a 4-day ride. I can't leave you alone that long. Then we find someone closer. Clara grabbed his arm. The Reverend. Isaiah Fletcher. He's helped families before, found them lawyers, got them to the territorial courts. He hates Luther as much as anyone. A preacher against a man like Crane. A preacher with connections. Clara held his gaze. Let me talk to him, today, before this gets worse. Josiah was quiet. She could see him wrestling with it, the need to act, to fight, to do something against the knowledge that she was right. Finally he nodded. I'll take you, he said, but we go armed. And we don't stay long. The church sat on the edge of town, small and white and stubborn against the endless brown of the prairie. Reverend Isaiah Fletcher was outside when they arrived, splitting wood with the steady rhythm of a man who'd done hard labor his whole life. He was 60 years old, dark-skinned, with hands that had known chains before they'd known freedom. He looked up as they approached. Didn't seem surprised. Mrs. Mercer, he said. Been wondering when you'd come. Clara slid down from the horse. You know why I'm here. I know Luther Crane's been buying up land like it's going out of style. I know he's got his eye on your place. Fletcher set down his axe. And I know he's got history with your friend there. Josiah stiffened. How? I've been a free man for 20 years, son. You learn to listen, to watch. Fletcher's eyes were kind but sharp. I don't know the whole story. Don't need to. What I need to know is whether you're here to run or to fight. Fight, Clara said without hesitation. Fletcher nodded slowly. Then you'd better come inside. The church was small, but warm, heated by a potbelly stove that glowed red in the corner. Fletcher gestured to a pair of worn chairs and settled himself behind a desk piled with papers. Luther Crane came to redemption 6 months ago, he began. Started buying debts from the bank in Denver, legal-like, all above board. Then he started squeezing. Families who couldn't pay found themselves homeless inside a month. How many? Josiah asked. 7 so far. Good people, hard workers, didn't matter. Fletcher's jaw tightened. Luther don't want the money, he wants the land. Why? Railroad's coming through, supposed to be announced next spring. Anyone who owns land along the route stands to make a fortune. Fletcher leaned forward. Your farm, Mrs. Mercer, it's right in the middle of where they're planning to build. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Samuel didn't know. He couldn't have known. No. But Luther does. And he'll do whatever it takes to get that land before the announcement. Even murder. Josiah's voice was flat. Fletcher met his eyes. He's killed before. Never proven, never charged. But folks know. He paused. Just like folks know about what happened in Kansas. The silence stretched tight as a wire. You knew, Josiah said quietly. This whole time. I knew Silas Crane was a cheat and a bully. I knew he got what was coming to him. Fletcher's voice was steady. And I know the man who killed him spent 15 years running from something that wasn't his fault. Josiah's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. It was my fault. I killed a man. You defended your brother. Fletcher stood, walked around the desk, and laid a hand on Josiah's shoulder. That ain't murder, son. That's love. Something cracked in Josiah's face. Clara watched him struggle, saw the boy he'd been, the man he'd become, the weight he'd carried for so long. My brother's dead because of me, he said, his voice breaking. Ezra, he couldn't live with what I'd done. What I made him witness. Is that what you believe? Fletcher asked softly. Or is that what you've told yourself? Josiah looked up. What do you mean? Fletcher glanced at Clara, then back at Josiah. There's something you need to know. Something I've been holding on to, waiting for the right time." He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "This came through my church 3 years ago," he said. "A letter from a man named Ezra Cole. He was looking for his brother." The world stopped. Clara watched Josiah's face go white, watched his hands start to shake. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Ezra's dead. He's been dead for 15 years. "That's what Luther wants you to believe." Fletcher held out the envelope. "Read it." Josiah took the letter like it was made of glass. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the paper. Clara moved closer, reading over his shoulder. "Isaiah, I'm looking for my brother Josiah Cole. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Colorado territory. I've been searching for 10 years, but every trail goes cold. If you have any word of him, please send it to the address below. I made mistakes. I let him think I was gone. I was ashamed of what happened, ashamed of what I almost did. But I'm alive and I need to make things right. Please, if you know anything." Ezra Cole. Josiah made a sound something between a sob and a laugh. The letter shook in his hands. "He's alive," he breathed. "He's alive." "Or he was 3 years ago." Fletcher's voice was gentle. "I tried to find you, but you were moving too fast. By the time I tracked you to Wyoming, you'd already gone." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Josiah's voice cracked. "When I came to town when you saw me." "Because Luther Crane was watching." Fletcher's face hardened. "He knows about this letter. He intercepted one I sent to Ezra's last known address. That's how he knew you were here." Clara's stomach dropped. "He's using Ezra to get to Josiah." "Using both of them?" Fletcher nodded. "My guess Luther's got Ezra somewhere, or he knows where he is, and he'll use that information to make Josiah do whatever he wants." "Like give up Clara's land? Like confess to Silas's murder?" Fletcher's eyes were grave. "Luther don't want money, son. He wants revenge, and he'll burn down everything you love to get it." Josiah was on his feet before Clara could stop him. "Where is he?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Where's Luther right now?" "Josiah, wait. He has my brother." Josiah turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her step back. "I thought Ezra was dead. I've been carrying that guilt for 15 years. And this whole time Luther knew. And if you go after him now, you'll prove everything he's been saying." Clara grabbed his arm. "You'll be the murderer, the outlaw. You'll give him exactly what he needs to take everything." "I don't care about the land." "I do." Clara's voice rang through the small church. "I care about the land because it's all my children have. It's the only thing I can give them, something solid, something real, something that no one can take away." She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. "If you ride out there now, Luther wins. He gets his revenge, he gets the land, and my children lose everything." Again. Her voice broke. "Don't make them lose you too." Josiah stared at her. His chest was heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. "He has Ezra," he said again. Quieter now, almost pleading. "Then we get Ezra back." Clara took his hands in hers. Together. The right way. Not his way. The silence stretched between them. Then slowly the fight went out of Josiah's shoulders. "How?" he asked. "How do we fight a man who holds all the cards?" Fletcher spoke up from behind them. "You find the one card he doesn't know about." They both turned. "Luther thinks he's got you cornered," Fletcher continued. "Thinks he knows everything. But he doesn't know that I've been building a case against him for 6 months. Witnesses, documents, proof of every crooked deal he's made since he came to redemption." "Why haven't you used it?" Clara asked. "Because I needed someone willing to testify, someone with nothing left to lose." Fletcher looked at Josiah. "Someone like you. You want me to turn myself in. I want you to tell the truth, not to Luther's bought judges, to the territorial court in Denver, to men who still believe in justice." Fletcher picked up a stack of papers from his desk. I've got a contact there, a marshal named Benjamin Drake. He's been investigating Luther for years. If we can get him the evidence he needs, Luther will kill us before we get halfway there, Josiah said flatly. Not if he doesn't know you're gone. Fletcher smiled grimly. That's where I come in. The plan came together over the next hour. Fletcher would spread word that Clara and Josiah had gone east running from Luther's threats. He'd make it convincing enough that Luther would send men after them away from Redemption and away from the real route to Denver. Meanwhile, Clara and Josiah would travel south, then cut west through the mountains longer, but safer through territory Luther didn't control. The children, Clara said suddenly. I can't leave them. They'll come with us, Josiah said. Through the mountains in winter. It's safer than leaving them here. His jaw set. Luther's already threatened to burn your house down. You think he'll stop at threats if he finds out you're gone? Clara closed her eyes. He was right. She hated it, but he was right. When do we leave? She asked. Tomorrow night, Fletcher said. I'll have supplies ready, and I'll send word ahead to Marshal Drake. Let him know you're coming. What about Ezra? Josiah's voice was strained. If Luther has him, then we'll find him. Fletcher laid a hand on his shoulder. But we do this right or we don't do it at all. Your brother's waited 15 years. He can wait a few more weeks. Josiah didn't answer, but Clara saw his jaw clench, saw the battle raging behind his eyes. We should go, she said softly, before anyone notices we're here. They rode home in silence. Clara held on to Josiah's waist, feeling the tension in his body, the way he held himself like a man about to shatter. She wanted to say something, anything, to ease the weight she knew he was carrying. But some wounds were too deep for words. They were half a mile from the house when Josiah pulled the horse to a stop. There's smoke, he said. Clara's blood went cold. She looked toward the horizon. A thin black column was rising from the direction of their farm. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, no, no. Josiah kicked the horse into a gallop. The house was still standing when they arrived, but the barn was engulfed in flames. Clara was off the horse before it stopped running toward the house, screaming her children's names. Tommy, Sarah, Willie. The door flew open. Tommy appeared, Sarah's hand in his, Willie in his arms. Mama! Clara fell to her knees and gathered them all against her, sobbing with relief. Are you hurt? Did anyone? We're okay. Tommy's voice was shaking. We saw the smoke, and we stayed inside like you said. We didn't open the door for nobody. Behind them, Josiah was running toward the barn. Josiah, don't! Clara screamed. But he was already gone, disappearing into the smoke. The next few minutes were the longest of Clara's life. She held her children and watched the flames eat everything they had. The tools, the hay, the boards Josiah had spent 2 weeks cutting. All of it gone. And somewhere in there, Josiah. Then he emerged. He was coughing, his face black with soot, his coat smoldering. In his arms he carried something, a box, small and wooden. He staggered toward them and fell to his knees. The Bible, he choked out. I got the Bible. Clara stared at him. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the ash on her cheeks. You stupid, stubborn man! She grabbed his collar and pulled him close. You could have died. Couldn't lose it. His voice was raw. It's all I have left of him. Clara looked at the Bible in his hands, worn, singed at the edges but intact, and she understood. He's coming for us, she said quietly. Luther. This was just the beginning. Josiah nodded. He looked at the burning barn, then at the children, then at her. Then we leave tonight, he said. We don't wait for Fletcher's signal. We don't wait for anything. The children aren't ready. The children will never be ready for this. Josiah took her face in his hands. But they're strong. They're Mercers, and they've got us. Clara looked at Tommy, who was standing tall despite his fear, at Sarah, who was whispering comfort to Willie, at her youngest, who had survived starvation and cold and was now watching his world burn with eyes that held more strength than any 4-year-old should have. "Okay," she said. "Okay, let's go." They packed in 20 minutes. Clara took only what they could carry, clothes, food, the little money she had hidden under the floorboards. Tommy helped Josiah load the saddlebags, while Sarah kept Willie calm. By the time they were ready, the barn had collapsed into embers. Josiah lifted Willie onto the horse first, then Sarah. Tommy insisted on walking. "I ain't a baby," he said, his chin jutting out until Josiah told him someone needed to guard the rear. "That's a man's job," Josiah said seriously. "You up for it?" Tommy straightened. "Yes, sir." Clara watched them together. Her son and this man who had stumbled into their lives 2 weeks ago, and felt something loosen in her chest. This, she thought. This is what a family looks like. They rode south into the darkness, leaving everything behind. Somewhere in the night, a coyote howled, and Clara Mercer didn't look back. They rode through the night and into the next day. Willie fell asleep against Clara's chest, his small body warm and limp. Sarah hummed quietly to herself, the same tuneless melody she always sang when she was scared. Tommy walked beside the horse, his hand resting on Josiah's stirrup, like he needed to know the man was still there. Nobody spoke about the barn. Nobody spoke about what they'd left behind. Some losses were too fresh for words. By midday, they reached the foothills. The air grew colder, thinner, and Clara could feel the change in the horse's breathing as they climbed. "We need to rest," she said. "The children—" "I know." Josiah's voice was tight. He hadn't slept since the fire. "There's a trading post ahead, half a mile, maybe less. We'll stop there." "Is it safe?" "Safer than open ground." Clara looked back at the trail behind them. Empty, quiet, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Josiah." "I know." He didn't turn around. "I feel it too." The trading post was run by a woman named Maggie Dunn. She was 50 years old, built like a fence post with arms that could wrestle a mule and eyes that had seen everything twice. She took one look at their ragged group and stepped aside without a word. "Inside," she said. "Quick now." Clara carried Willie through the door, while Josiah helped Sarah down. Tommy followed last, his hand hovering near the knife Josiah had given him that morning. "You folks look like you've been through hell," Maggie said, bolting the door behind them. "Close enough," Josiah answered. "Luther Crane." The name hung in the air like smoke. "You know him?" Clara asked. "Know of him." Maggie's face hardened. "He burned out the Hendersons last month. Good family, 4 kids. They're living in a church basement in Denver now." Clara's stomach turned. "Did anyone help them?" "Nobody could. Luther's got the law in his pocket and the bank in his bed. Anyone who crosses him ends up ruined." Maggie looked at Josiah. "Or dead." "We're going to Denver," Clara said. "To Marshal Drake." Maggie's eyebrows rose. "Drake. He's been after Luther for years. Never could make anything stick." "We have evidence." Josiah stepped forward. "Reverend Fletcher's been building a case. Witnesses, documents enough to bring Luther down. If you can get there." Maggie shook her head. "Luther's got men all over the territory. The moment he figures out where you're headed, then we don't let him figure it out." Something passed between them. Respect, maybe. Recognition. "There's a back trail," Maggie said finally. "Through Widow's Pass. It's rough going, but it'll cut 2 days off your travel and keep you away from the main roads." "How do you know it?" "My husband used to run supplies through there before Luther killed him for refusing to sell our land." Her voice didn't waver. "I know every inch of that trail. I can draw you a map." Clara reached out and took the woman's hand. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Maggie squeezed back. "Thank me when you make it to Denver alive." They rested for 2 hours. Clara put the children to bed in Maggie's back room, piling blankets over them, until only their faces showed. Sarah fell asleep, instantly exhausted beyond dreams. Willie curled against her side, his thumb in his mouth. Tommy stayed awake. "Mama." His voice was barely a whisper. "Is Mr. Josiah gonna leave?" Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "What makes you think that?" "Papa left." Tommy's eyes were too old for his face. "When things got hard, he said he was going to fix everything, and then he just didn't come back." Clara's heart cracked. "Tommy." She took his face in her hands. "Josiah isn't your father." "I know." "No, listen to me." She leaned closer. "Your father was a scared man. He didn't know how to fight, so he ran. But Josiah—" She glanced toward the door where she could hear low voices talking. "Josiah's been running his whole life, and he's tired of it. He wants to stay." "How do you know?" "Because he came back." Clara smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. "He went into a burning barn for a Bible, Tommy. A Bible his brother gave him. You don't do that if you're planning to leave." Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I want him to stay," he whispered. "I know, baby." Clara kissed his forehead. "I want that too." She found Josiah outside studying Maggie's map by lantern light. "The children are asleep," she said. "Good." He didn't look up. "We leave at first light. If we push hard, we can make Widow's Pass by nightfall." "Josiah." Something in her voice made him stop. He looked at her. "Tommy asked if you were going to leave." Josiah's jaw tightened. "What did you tell him?" "The truth." Clara stepped closer. "That you're not his father. That you're tired of running. That you came back." "Clara, I need to know." She cut him off. "When this is over, when we get to Denver, when Luther is stopped, what happens then?" Josiah set down the map. His eyes found hers in the lantern light. "What do you want to happen?" I asked first. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You always this stubborn?" "Always." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the Bible, singed, battered, but whole. "Ezra wrote something inside," he said. "The day he gave it to me. I didn't read it for years. Couldn't bring myself to look." Clara waited. "It says, 'Find something worth staying for.'" Josiah's voice cracked. "I spent 15 years thinking I never would, thinking I didn't deserve to. And then I rode through a blizzard and heard a boy crying." He looked at her. "I found it, Clara. I found something worth staying for." She didn't speak. Couldn't. He took her hand, rough, calloused, warm. "When this is over," he said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere, if you'll have me." Clara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. "I'll have you," she whispered against his chest. "I'll have you." They left at dawn. The trail through Widow's Pass was narrow and treacherous, but Maggie's map was good. They climbed through rock and scrub, the horse picking its way carefully, while the children rode in silence. By midday, they'd reached the halfway point. "We should stop," Clara said. "Let the horse rest." Josiah shook his head. "Not yet. There's a—" He stopped mid-sentence. His whole body went rigid. "What?" Clara followed his gaze. "What is it?" "Riders." His voice was barely a whisper. "Coming up behind us." Clara's blood went cold. She turned and saw them, 3 figures on horseback, still distant, but closing fast. "Luther's men." "Has to be." Josiah was already moving, lifting Tommy onto the horse behind Sarah. "We need to run. The horse can't carry all of us at full gallop. Then it carries the children." Josiah grabbed her arm. "You go with them. I'll hold them off." "No." Clara wrenched free. "Absolutely not." "Clara." "I said no." She grabbed the rifle from the saddlebag. You think I'm going to ride away while you die? You think I'm going to make my children watch that? If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you." Her voice was steel. "Because we're doing this together. Like I said, no more running." Josiah stared at her. The riders were getting closer. "You know how to shoot that thing. Point and pull. How hard can it be?" Despite everything, he almost smiled. "All right." He pulled his own pistol. "Tommy, take the reins. If something goes wrong—" "I'm not leaving," Tommy said fiercely. "If something goes wrong," Josiah repeated, "you ride. You don't look back. You get your sisters to Denver and you find Marshal Drake. Can you do that?" Tommy's chin trembled, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good man." Josiah squeezed his shoulder. Then he turned to face the trail. The riders appeared around the bend, 3 men just as Clara had feared. Hard faces, heavy coats, rifles slung across their backs. The one in front pulled his horse to a stop. "Josiah Cole," he called out, "Luther Crane sends his regards." "Tell Luther he can come say them himself." Josiah's voice was calm, deadly. "Or is he too much of a coward to face a man directly?" The rider's smile faded. Brave words for a dead man. "I've been dead for 15 years. Josiah raised his pistol. "Hasn't slowed me down yet." The rider's hand moved toward his rifle. Clara fired first. The shot went wide. She'd never fired a rifle before, and the kick nearly knocked her off her feet. But it did what she needed. The riders scattered their horses, spooked by the noise. "Go!" Josiah shouted. "Tommy, ride!" But Tommy didn't move. "I ain't leaving you!" the boy screamed. One of the riders had recovered. He raised his rifle, aimed at Clara. Josiah stepped in front of her. The shot rang out. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he'd been hit. She saw him stumble, saw his hand go to his side, but he was still standing. The rider wasn't. He lay in the dirt, clutching his shoulder, his rifle 3 feet away. Behind him, someone else had emerged from the rocks. A figure Clara didn't recognize. The other 2 riders wheeled their horses ready to flee. "Don't move!" The newcomer's voice rang out clear and cold. "U.S. Marshal, you're under arrest." Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the rocky ground, the rifle slipping from her fingers. Her whole body was shaking. "Clara!" Josiah was kneeling beside her, his hands on her face. "Clara, look at me. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, couldn't speak. "The children." She looked toward the horse. Tommy was still holding the reins, his face white. Sarah had buried her face in Willie's hair. All 3 of them were crying. "They're okay," she managed. "They're okay." The marshal approached, his badge glinting in the afternoon light. He was younger than Clara expected, maybe 40, with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Benjamin Drake," he said. "Reverend Fletcher sent word you were coming. Didn't expect to find you this far out." "Luther's men found us first," Josiah said. "I noticed." Drake looked at the wounded rider, then at the other 2, who were now face down in the dirt, with their hands behind their heads. "These boys have been on Luther's payroll for months. They'll talk. They always do. You can take down Luther with their testimony. With their testimony, Fletcher's evidence, and yours." Drake allowed himself a small smile. "Luther Crane won't see the outside of a prison for the rest of his natural life." Clara felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been clenched tight for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe. "There's something else," Josiah said. His voice was strained. "My brother, Ezra. Fletcher said Luther might have information about where he is." Drake's expression shifted. "I know about Ezra." "You do?" "He contacted me 6 months ago, said he was looking for his brother and that Luther Crane was using the search to track you down." Drake paused. "He's been in hiding ever since, trying to protect you." Josiah's face crumpled. "Where is he?" "Denver." Drake put a hand on his shoulder. "He's been waiting for you, son. He never stopped waiting." Clara watched Josiah's shoulders shake, watched 15 years of grief and guilt and longing come pouring out in a single broken sob. She went to him, wrapped her arms around him, held on while he cried. "He's alive," she whispered. "He's alive, Josiah. You're going to see him." He held on to her, like she was the only solid thing in the world, and maybe in that moment she was. They made camp that night under Drake's protection. 2 of his deputies had joined them, and the captured riders were bound and secured. For the first time in weeks, Clara let herself believe they might actually survive this. The children were asleep by the fire, exhausted, but safe. Tommy had finally stopped shaking. Sarah was smiling in her dreams. Willie had eaten 3 helpings of beans and asked if Marshal Drake could teach him to ride a horse. Clara sat beside Josiah watching the flames. "What was he like?" she asked quietly. "Ezra, before." Josiah was silent for a long moment. "Bright," he said finally. "Brighter than me. He could make anyone laugh, didn't matter if they were having the worst day of their life. He'd say something, crack some joke, and suddenly everything seemed bearable. He sounds wonderful." He was. Josiah's voice caught. "And I left him. I left him alone in that town with blood on his hands and nowhere to turn. You were protecting him. I was protecting myself." The words came out harsh, bitter. "I told myself it was for him, but it wasn't. I was scared. Scared of what I'd done, scared of what would happen if I stayed." Clara took his hand. "Josiah, look at me." He turned. His eyes were wet. "You made a choice," she said. "A terrible choice, in a terrible moment. And you've been punishing yourself for it ever since. But Ezra's alive. He's been looking for you. He's been waiting. What if he can't forgive me? What if he already has?" The question hung between them. "Fletcher's letter," Clara continued. "Ezra said he needed to make things right. Not you. Him. He's been carrying guilt, too. Whatever happened between you, it wasn't one-sided." Josiah stared at her. "How do you know?" "Because I know what it's like to blame yourself for things you couldn't control." She squeezed his hand. "Samuel left and I spent 3 years wondering what I did wrong, what I could have done different. What was broken inside me that made him run?" "There's nothing broken inside you. I know that now." She smiled softly. "It took a stubborn cowboy riding through a blizzard to show me." Josiah pulled her close, pressed his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." "You deserved it." She kissed him gently. "You always deserved it." They reached Denver 3 days later. The city rose up from the plains like a promise-building streets, the bustle of people living lives that had nothing to do with Luther Crane or burned barns or children crying from hunger. Clara held Willie's hand as they walked through the crowded streets, her heart pounding with something she barely recognized. Hope. Marshal Drake led them to a boarding house on the edge of town. Clean, quiet, safe. "You'll stay here while I process the paperwork," he said. "Shouldn't take more than a few days. Once Luther's arrested, you'll be free to go home." Home. Clara tested the word. It felt strange, foreign. "Your land is safe, Mrs. Mercer." Drake's voice was kind. "Luther's claims have already been thrown out. The deed is yours, free and clear." She nodded. Couldn't trust her voice. Drake turned to Josiah. "There's someone waiting for you," he said quietly. "Upstairs, room 12. Josiah went pale. Clara touched his arm. "Go. We'll be here when you get back." He looked at her, at the children, at the life he'd found when he'd stopped running. Then he climbed the stairs. The door to room 12 was closed. Josiah stood in front of it for a long time. His hand shook as he raised it to knock. 3 taps, soft, uncertain. Footsteps inside, the scrape of a chair, and then the door opened. Ezra Cole stood in the doorway. He was older, of course, he was older. 15 years had passed, but his eyes were the same, bright, warm, alive. Josiah. His voice broke on the name. Ezra. They stared at each other. Two brothers separated by time and guilt and 1,000 miles of empty road. Then Ezra stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Josiah. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I should have come with you. I should have. You're alive." Josiah's voice was raw. "That's all that matters. You're alive." They held each other in the doorway, crying like children, 15 years of pain pouring out in a single embrace. And somewhere downstairs, Clara Mercer wiped her eyes and smiled. Because sometimes, against all odds, broken things found their way back together. And sometimes, love was enough to make them whole. Ezra wouldn't let go. They stood in that doorway for what felt like hours, two grown men crying like the boys they'd been 15 years ago. Josiah could feel his brother's heartbeat against his chest, steady, real alive, and wondered if he was dreaming. "I thought you were dead," he finally managed. "All this time, I thought—" "I know." Ezra pulled back, wiping his face. "I know what they told you. What Luther made sure you believed. The hanging. They said you hanged yourself in a barn outside Dodge City." Ezra's face darkened. "That wasn't me. That was a drifter Luther paid to die with my name in his pocket. He wanted you broken, Josiah. Wanted you to spend the rest of your life running and hurting." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "Why?" Josiah's voice cracked. "What did I ever do to him? You killed his cousin, his blood." Ezra shook his head. "Men like Luther don't care about right and wrong. They care about family, about revenge. He's been hunting you since the day Silas hit the floor." Josiah stumbled backward, bracing himself against the wall. 15 years, he whispered. "I spent 15 years believing I killed you, believing my brother was dead because of me. And I spent 15 years trying to find you." Ezra stepped closer. "Every town, every territory, every rumor of a tall man with a limp who didn't talk much. I followed them all, but you were too good at disappearing. I had to be. I know." Ezra's eyes were wet. "I know why you ran, and I know what it cost you." Josiah looked at his brother, really looked. Ezra had aged hard. The laugh lines around his eyes had turned to creases. His hair was gray at the temples, his hands rough from years of labor. But underneath all of it, he was still there, the boy who'd followed Josiah everywhere, who'd believed his big brother could fix anything. "I'm sorry," Josiah said, "for leaving, for not—" "Stop." Ezra grabbed his shoulders. "You saved my life that night. Silas would have killed me if you hadn't stepped in. You did what you had to do. And then I ran. Because staying would have gotten us both killed." Ezra's grip tightened. "I was angry for a long time. I won't lie about that. But I understand now. I understand what it cost you to walk away. It cost me everything." "No." Ezra shook his head. "Not everything. You found something, didn't you, a woman? Children. I saw them downstairs." Josiah's throat closed. "Clara," he managed. "Her name is Clara. And those kids, Tommy, Sarah, Willie, they're not mine by blood. But they're yours." Ezra smiled softly. "I can see it in your face, the way you look at them. They gave me a reason to stop running. Then they gave me back my brother." Ezra pulled him into another embrace. "That's all I ever wanted, Josiah. That's all I've been praying for." They held each other until the tears ran dry. Clara was waiting when Josiah came back downstairs. She stood by the window watching the children play in the small courtyard behind the boarding house. Tommy was teaching Willie how to throw a ball. Sarah was making up songs about nothing in particular. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "How is he?" Josiah couldn't speak. He just crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "That good?" she murmured against his chest. "Better." His voice was thick. "He's alive, Clara. He's alive, and he's here, and he doesn't hate me." "Of course he doesn't hate you." I know what you thought." She pulled back and took his face in her hands. "But you were wrong. You've been wrong about yourself for 15 years. He closed his eyes. Let her words sink in. "I want you to meet him," he said. "Properly. He stopped, swallowed. "I want him to meet my family." Clara's breath caught. "Your family." "If you'll have me." He opened his eyes. "I know I don't have much to offer. No money, no land, no name that isn't stained with blood. But I love you, Clara. I love your children. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worth the chance you gave me." Clara stared at him. Her eyes were bright with tears. "Josiah Cole," she said slowly. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to let me stay." He took her hands. "Forever this time. No more running. No more hiding. Just us. Together." She was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that Josiah's heart started to pound with fear. Then she smiled. "Well," she said, "it's about time." She kissed him. And somewhere in the courtyard, Tommy looked up and saw them through the window. And for the first time in 3 years, he smiled like a boy instead of a man. The trial of Luther Crane began 2 weeks later. Marshal Drake had built an airtight case. Witnesses documents the testimony of Luther's own men. Reverend Fletcher traveled from Redemption to speak, his quiet voice filling the courtroom with stories of families destroyed and lives ruined. Clara testified about the threats, the burned barn, the note nailed to her door. And Josiah told the truth about Kansas. He stood in front of the judge and jury, his voice steady, his hands still. He told them about Silas Crane and the knife and the blood. He told them about running, about hiding, about 15 years of believing his brother was dead. He told them about Clara. "She gave me something I'd forgotten existed," he said, looking at her across the courtroom. "Hope. A reason to stop running. A home." The defense lawyer tried to paint him as a murderer, a vagrant, a man with blood on his hands and darkness in his heart. But when the jury came back, it took them less than an hour. Luther Crane was found guilty on 17 counts: land fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in federal prison. Luther screamed as they dragged him from the courtroom. "This isn't over." He was fighting against the deputies, his face twisted with rage. "You hear me, Cole? This isn't over." Josiah stood, walked to the railing that separated them. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." Luther spat at his feet. The deputies hauled him away, still screaming, until his voice faded to nothing. Clara took Josiah's hand. "It's done," she whispered. "It's done." They walked out of the courthouse into the spring sunshine, and for the first time in 15 years, Josiah Cole breathed like a free man. The wedding was small. They held it in Reverend Fletcher's church with wildflowers on the altar and sunlight streaming through the windows. Ezra stood beside Josiah as his best man, his eyes wet, his smile wider than Clara had ever seen. Tommy walked Clara down the aisle. "You ready, Mama?" he whispered at the door. "I've been ready my whole life." She squeezed his arm. "I just didn't know it until now." They walked together, mother and son, toward the man waiting at the altar. Sarah scattered flower petals ahead of them, giggling when she threw too many at once. Willie sat in the front pew, clutching the wooden horse Josiah had carved for him, watching with wide, solemn eyes. Josiah couldn't breathe. Clara was wearing a simple dress, blue, like the sky after a storm, and her hair was down, falling loose around her shoulders. She looked like something out of a dream, something he didn't deserve, but had somehow been given anyway. You okay? Ezra murmured beside him. No. Josiah's voice cracked. I don't think I'll ever be okay again. Ezra laughed softly. That's love, brother. Get used to it. Clara reached the altar. Tommy placed her hand in Josiah's and stepped back, his chin trembling. Take care of her, he said fiercely, or I know. Josiah met his eyes. I will. Fletcher cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, he began, we are gathered here today to witness something rare, something precious. The union of two souls who found each other in the darkest of times and chose to walk forward together. Clara's hand tightened in Josiah's. Clara Mercer, Fletcher continued. Do you take this man to be your husband? To love, honor, and cherish him in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live? I do. Clara's voice was clear, strong, certain. And Josiah Cole, do you take this woman to be your wife, to love, honor, and cherish her in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live? Josiah looked at Clara, at the woman who had pulled him out of a blizzard and into a life worth living. I do, he said. I always will. Fletcher smiled. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He nodded at Josiah. You may kiss your bride. Josiah took Clara's face in his hands. I love you, he whispered. I know, she whispered back. Now kiss me before these children start complaining. He laughed, really laughed for the first time in years, and kissed her. The church erupted in cheers. Tommy whooped, Sarah clapped her hands, Willie yelled something about horses that nobody understood, and Ezra wiped his eyes and thought that maybe, just maybe, the world still had room for miracles. They rebuilt the barn that summer. Ezra stayed to help his carpenter's hands, making quick work of what would have taken Josiah months alone. Tommy worked alongside them, learning to measure and cut and hammer with the focus of a boy becoming a man. Clara watched them from the porch, Willie on her hip, Sarah playing at her feet. Mama, Sarah said one afternoon, is Uncle Ezra going to live with us forever? I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to him. I hope so. Sarah looked up with serious eyes. He makes Papa laugh. Clara's heart stuttered. Papa? That's what Willie calls him now. Sarah shrugged like it was nothing. Tommy says we can too if we want. Is that okay? Clara blinked back tears. That's more than okay, she managed. That's perfect. She looked across the yard at Josiah, who was showing Tommy how to check a board for straightness. He caught her eye and smiled, that small, quiet smile that was hers alone. She smiled back. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara found Josiah on the porch. He was sitting on the steps, looking out at nothing in particular. Just the land, the sky, the stars beginning to emerge. She sat down beside him. Sarah asked about Ezra today, she said. Whether he's staying. Josiah nodded slowly. He's thinking about it. There's land available south of here. Good land. He could build something. Would you want that? Having him close? More than anything. Josiah's voice was thick. I spent 15 years thinking he was gone. Having him back, having him here. He stopped, swallowed. It's more than I ever dared hope for. Clara took his hand. Tommy called you Papa today. Josiah went very still. What? Sarah told me. Willie's been doing it for weeks apparently. And Tommy. Clara smiled. Tommy gave the others permission. Josiah's breath caught. His eyes grew wet. I'm not. You are. Clara squeezed his hand. You've been their father since the moment you walked through that door with a sack of flour and a half-frozen heart. Biology doesn't make a family, Josiah. Love does. He turned to look at her. Tears were streaming down his face. I don't deserve this. Stop saying that. Her voice was firm. Stop believing you're not worthy of happiness. You've earned every single moment of this life, and I won't let you spend it apologizing for surviving." Josiah stared at her. "How?" he whispered. "How did I find you?" "You didn't find me." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You found us, and we found you. That's how it works." They sat together in the darkness, watching the stars come out one by one. Somewhere inside, a child laughed in their sleep, and Josiah Cole, for the first time in his life, felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Autumn came to the prairie like a gift. The harvest was better than anyone expected. Clara's fields yielded wheat and corn and more vegetables than they could eat. Ezra helped build a root cellar. Tommy learned to preserve meat. Sarah appointed herself in charge of the chickens, and Willie followed the new barn cat everywhere it went. The house felt full in a way it never had before. Clara stood in the kitchen one morning, rolling out dough for biscuits, when Josiah came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Morning, wife," she smiled. "Morning, husband." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You feel different today." "Different how?" "Lighter." He turned her around to face him. "Happy." "I am happy." She touched his face. "For the first time in years, I don't wake up afraid. I don't go to sleep wondering if we'll make it through tomorrow." And she hesitated. There was something she'd been waiting to tell him. Something she'd only just confirmed. "Clara." His brow furrowed. "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. His eyes went wide. "You're about 3 months along, near as I can figure." Her voice trembled. "I wasn't sure how you'd—" He kissed her. It was the kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet again. "A baby," he breathed. "Your baby." She smiled through her tears. "Our baby." Josiah dropped to his knees. Right there in the kitchen, with flour on his hands and tears on his face, he pressed his forehead to her stomach and whispered something she couldn't hear. But she didn't need to. She ran her fingers through his hair and let the tears fall, and outside the children were laughing, and the sun was rising, and everything finally, impossibly, was exactly as it should be. The baby came in spring. A girl, pink and perfect, and screaming at the top of her lungs. Josiah held her like she was made of glass, his big, rough hands trembling against her tiny body. "What should we name her?" Clara asked, exhausted but glowing. Josiah looked at her, then at the baby, then at the doorway where Tommy and Sarah and Willie were crowded together, trying to get a glimpse of their new sister. "Hope," he said quietly. "I want to name her Hope." Clara's eyes filled. "Hope Cole," she whispered. "I think that's perfect." Ezra appeared in the doorway behind the children, his own eyes wet. "She's beautiful," he said. "Just like her mama. And stubborn like her papa, I'm sure." Clara laughed weakly. "God help us all." Josiah bent down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. "For what?" "For everything." He pulled back and looked at her, really looked the way he had that first night by the fire. "For saving me. You saved yourself." She touched his face. "I just gave you a place to land." He smiled. That small, quiet smile that was hers alone. "Same thing," he said. And maybe it was. Reverend Fletcher came to baptize Hope on a Sunday morning in May. The whole family gathered in the parlor, Clara and Josiah, Tommy and Sarah and Willie Ezra standing proud as the baby's godfather. Agnes Holloway made the trip from town, bringing enough food to feed an army. Marshal Drake sent a letter of congratulations, along with news that Luther Crane had died in prison. Heart attack, the doctors said. But Clara suspected it was something darker, a man consumed by his own hatred, finally destroyed by it. She didn't mourn him. Neither did Josiah. Some people didn't deserve mourning. After the baptism, after the food and the laughter and the chaos of children running through the house, Clara found a moment alone on the porch, The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rose. The land stretched out before her, her land free and clear, earned with blood and sweat and tears. Josiah appeared beside her, Hope sleeping in his arms. "Thinking about something?" he asked. "Everything." She leaned against him. "3 years ago I was ready to die. I walked into a blizzard with Willie in my arms because I thought there was nothing left. And now," she looked at him, at the baby in his arms, at the house behind them full of noise and love and life. "Now I have everything," she said. "More than I ever dreamed." Josiah shifted Hope to one arm and wrapped the other around Clara's shoulders. "Me too," he said quietly. "Me too." They stood together watching the sun go down, listening to the sounds of their family inside. Tommy's voice teaching Willie something complicated. Sarah's laughter bright and clear. Ezra's low chuckle. And somewhere underneath it all, the steady beat of a life well lived. Clara closed her eyes. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." Josiah pressed a kiss to her hair. "Always have. Always will." The prairie wind blew soft and warm, carrying with it the smell of grass and earth and home. And Clara Mercer Cole, who had once knelt in the snow and prayed for death, stood on her porch with her husband beside her and her daughter in his arms, and knew with every fiber of her being that she was exactly where she belonged. Not because a cowboy had saved her, but because she had saved herself. And found in the saving a love strong enough to build a life on. The kind of love that didn't rescue. The kind that stayed.